that sort of process seems to work pretty effectively. The second area in which I think you can make it work effectively is when you basically get the idea, and then how do you get the idea to an actual commercial application that really gets out and changes the world in some way. There, I think, you end up making bets, but you can make relatively small bets as you move from the idea of how to of what the idea is to proof of concept, to first prototype, to first contract, to actual commercial capacity. Small amounts of targeted money that allow one to do that, without entirely taking out a fourth mortgage on your house and so forth. To get it to that point, you really do see a proof of concept works, makes an enormous amount of sense, and creates enough continued investment, both practically and intellectually, on the part of the people who are developing it, that they stay involved in a critical way. They don't just sell it off and it goes off the top. We've actually worked with some investors to set up a fund at the University of Washington. Actually, it's not at the University of Washington, but it will target particularly those critical points in that process to try and help create real value added to move that along, to see whether there's real commercial potential or not, and put small discrete amount of money in at those critical junctures. So you're always making bets, but you can be very ecumenical about those bets if you have the right infrastructure that really proposes some real judgment. And then you make a number of bets, and some are going to pan out and some aren't. But if you're strategic about how you do it, both at the national level and then as we're doing it at the very local level, I think it doesn't mean every great idea is fostered and nurtured. There's some that are going to be, unfortunately, probably not going to succeed, otherwise should, and there are going to be some ideas that will be funded that don't pan out. But the key is to get there.
I think to a large extent, the marketplace is going to determine winners and losers. We'll partner with Boeing, and we want to produce lighter, more fuel-efficient airplanes. And if we're able to do that, then that's a product that Boeing ultimately will purchase and buy. And we will infuse that, if you will, in the aviation industry. Universities and colleges need to become much more nimble in technology transfer. They need to make decisions much faster than they've ever made before about any IP value associated with the work of faculty members. And if the institution decides that there is no IP value associated with it, we need to then free up our researchers and others to go out and commercialize it elsewhere, commercialize it in the private sector. Universities are getting much better at that. Lyndon, I must tell you, you've done a great job at the University of Washington in that precise way. And we talked about the urgency associated with it. So I think that the marketplace, ASH, is going to be the final referee. And our faculty members will do exactly that. I was just talking with one of the members of our faculty a few moments ago about his desire to build a new company. And he's doing exactly that. He has a product in place. And as an institution, we're going to give him the flexibility to do precisely that. We need to do much more of it and realize the return on the investment that has been made in our institutions, whether those investments are made from the public sector, from the private sector, and allow our faculty members to go out and do what they do well, engage in technology transfer.
Well, let's keep on that theme, because I think that, as a geek engineer, innovation is fun. I mean, I love innovation. I love the notion that we have to explore. I love that spider that got dropped to the ground and studied a bunch of information. But, commercialization essentially is where it's at. And so, all the research, all the innovation, all the invention has to lead somewhere. And it's not clear that we're actually getting enough takeoff on commercializing good, innovative ideas. And I think you were starting to kind of get into that bit of conversation around what might be working and what's not working. But from your lens, what do we have to do different to get more innovative products into the marketplace?
Sure. We have to be very clear about outcomes. And we have to be clear about the alignment of the research and scholarship in which our faculty members are engaged. And we also have to be very clear about the deliverables associated with it and the time frame in which we expect those deliverables to occur. I agree with President Young. I believe that basic research will continue to be a fundamental core of what happens in our nation. But I would also argue that we are going to have to abandon, if you will, this esoteric research that is not in alignment with where we are going. And research for the sake of research is not the modality that will determine where our country is going and what the research protocol is going to be in the future. And we need to make sure that we have it in lockstep with what the state's priorities are, secondarily with where federal priorities are headed, and what's happening in the private sector, and to be as nimble as we possibly can.
That's great. And President Young heard quite a bit about technology transfer at the University of Washington, program that you folks have. Could you elaborate a little bit more on technology transfer and how it's actually working at the University of Washington?
You know, I can't, but it's a really dangerous question to ask me.
Okay.
As
Let me double down on the question.
as Kim mentioned, I spent the last 7 years at the University of Utah, and I think that was the first time I really had thought a great deal about the issue of transferring what we were doing at the university out into the real world. And a number of things became clear. The clearest thing was is that it requires a certain kind of cultural change on the part of the university, but less of a cultural change than you might think, because professors come to the university to do that. I mean, that's why they're there. They all make a lot more money in the private sector. They make a conscious choice because they think there's something they can do. What we worked at there and what we're doing a great deal of at the University of Washington is convincing professors that partnering with the business community is a way of extending what they're doing in the laboratory out into the laboratory. If you cure cancer in the States, the test tube, it's interesting cocktail party chatter, but nobody gets better. And the only way to get that out is not for us to sit around and publish one more peer-reviewed paper, however valuable that may be, and we want to do that. Nevertheless, we then need to partner in a different way with the business community. And the interesting thing, learned a number of lessons in working, it's not learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, but what also works really powerfully is if you turn the students loose to be accepted part of that. Because what we discovered at Utah, what we discovered at the University of Washington is you have this enormous pent-up workforce that is passionate about doing this and that can create teams that understand both the technology and can interface with the business community in a natural way. In any event, there's lots of steps that need to be sort of taken in that regard. I mentioned earlier the targeting and the money, the creating reduced transaction costs in terms of licensing the IP, and the list goes on and on. By the time we're done at the University of Utah, we had spun out more companies than any other university in the nation, more than MIT. And we're going to surpass that pretty dramatically and very soon here at the University of Washington, because all of these pieces are in place and now coming together in that way. And what I think is important to understand is none of it really fundamentally alters our core agenda as a university. In fact, it enhances in lots of different ways our core missions of basic research, our core missions of teaching in really powerful ways when it's done right, I think, and yet creates that energy. Universities historically have been pretty bad at this, to be honest. And I think there's a movement around the country, which I think we are happily one of the leaders in transforming that to make it much easier, more efficient, more effective, and to give professors the space to really do that.
That's wonderful.
Well, one of the things that we're, just one note, I must tell this audience though that there is just an amazing team of individuals who are leading this conversation and helping to galvanize research and the scholarship of our faculty. Lyndon Rhodes leads that at the University of Washington. The foundation pieces were laid by John Gardner at WSU and taken off yet again by Anson Fatma. And so those are the individuals that I would urge all of you to interact with on a regular basis. Institutions also becoming much more strategic in what we do and trying to create a synergy, if you will, between the research expertise of our faculty and the needs of our community as well. And I want to give you a couple specific examples associated with it. At our research station and throughout, we're looking at permeable surfaces, trying to develop new surfaces that will last longer, that will be able to tolerate the flow of water, storm water, rainwater, etc., that's constantly pounding these surfaces. And we have researchers who are focused on that, important, both now as well as into the future. And if I were to look at the work we're engaged in at WSU Tri-Cities, it's around bioproducts and biofuels. And we want to begin to focus that campus in those precise ways. In Spokane, it's going to be in the context of the health sciences, you see. So there must be an alignment between the research expertise that we have in the communities in which we find ourselves. And that's the value of having two dynamic research universities in our state that's collaborating across everything that we do. And with the incredible expertise of the University of Washington and what we provide at WSU, we believe that we're really covering the landscape of new discoveries. And right in the middle of it will be the relationships that we have with the private sector as well. Because if they can deploy those resources in the generation of new knowledge that's predicated on the work that we're engaged in, they can then use other resources for other areas that are much more strategic to where they are right now. And that's the return on the investment that ultimately will occur. And so we want to have these very active and meaningful partnerships across the whole spectrum. And that's the importance of this work and this engagement. And we need you to help lead us in the direction of where those new discoveries should reside. And I must tell you, between the two institutions, I submit to you that we'll have the researchers who will be able to develop those new answers and those new solutions.
Fantastic. And clearly the work that you folks have done at WSU around aviation biofuels is just a stunning example of that type of cross-collaboration. I know we're running out of time. I still have 30 questions to ask you, so but maybe I'll just get to a couple of them. Maybe we'll just try to get to them pretty quick just to kind of get to the end of the session. You're doing both great, by the way. When the government, federal government works on research, they create a market within DOD facilities to actually take in some of that opportunity. This is the balance between supply and demand. Essentially, we can come up with all kinds of innovative ideas, but if no one buys these ideas, then we can't really get to commercializing them. And so what I've noticed is that the federal government will develop ideas to DARPA or ARPA-E, and then they'll actually find ways within military settings or others to take them in. Can we do more within our university construct to actually take in innovative ideas and actually deploy them across either the built environment or the facilities that you all have? And clearly, you must have a jet each, don't you?
And nuclear reactors, sure.
Yeah, nuclear reactors and all that. But so what do you think about commercializing early ideas on your campuses? Should we do more of that? Are we doing enough of that?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, Ash, because I actually have been talking with our Vice Provost for Research about the possibility of using the university, and I put some funds in a pot to basically use the university as a large-scale experimental laboratory to, you know, as we work on some of this remarkably innovative stuff on solar power, where, you know, again, you know, printed on paper this thin, and it becomes wrap around on buildings and smokestacks and so forth. The idea being in part, as it is with small appliances, securing energy to run things at the source closest possible to the place in which it's actually used. We're working on making the university sort of available for that kind of thing, as well as looking at creating smart buildings. We're partnering with the Bullitt Foundation right now, building a building that will be the most energy efficient living building in North America. And it's going to be a fascinating exercise, but the idea is it's sensitivity to all the environmental variables that affect temperature, affect heat, that affect air quality and so on in the building, are all, it's essentially an application of every one of them. So I think there's a lot of that can be done at the universities themselves, to experiment and try some of this.
That's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, universities must and should do that. It used to be that when we were recruiting students to the institutions, the questions were fairly simple. They wanted to see a residence hall, they wanted to know, will I have one roommate or multiple roommates? Then the question changed to what was the bandwidth capacity associated with our institutions. Now the question is, what is the university doing in the context of sustainability? This conversation will be driven by our students. They will demand it, they will expect it, they will make decisions about institutions they will ultimately go to, predicated on our work in the context of the environment and sustainability. And they will literally choose institutions to go to because of their commitment in this area. And what that will do is simply galvanize the research of our faculty and the alignment that we talked about before, which is so important. So, students will make that decision and they're going to push our faculty in those precise ways.
That's great. And so just in wrapping up, you've got a group of about 300 people in the audience. You've been great. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and all that. Maybe in closing, any last thoughts, particularly any particular action item that you think this group should walk away with? Dr. Floyd?
From my perspective, I would say continue to do what you're doing. Continue to push us. Continue to be critics of our work. Help us to focus our research and scholarship in ways that will provide real value. We want our institutions to have a value-added dimension associated with what we do. Just the attendance at this event is reflective of how important this is for our state and how pioneering it is for where we will actually take the entire world. So I would just simply urge you to do precisely what you've been doing before. Continue your commitment. Let us know. Give us appropriate feedback. And help us with the new research and the new discoveries that will enable you to have companies that will continue to have a transformative and innovative approach to what occurs.
I guess I would make two or three pleas, I suppose. One is take a professor to lunch. Get to know the work that's going on in the university. You'd be stunned at the collaborative opportunities, and we are doing everything we can to make that as seamless and effective as possible. So come see what's going on. I mean, our capacity to commercialize, I've got 3,000 brilliant pointy-headed professors, and I need business people up there helping see what the market niches are, how to do that. That's sort of one. Secondly, I think the state ultimately begins to fall behind if we don't find ways for the state to also systematically invest in research mission in these universities. Federal funding is flat. If you look around the country, states are putting upwards of $30 and $40 billion a year into their research universities, into the research arm. Our failure to do that ultimately will be significant for the future of the state. And thirdly, even on the instructional side, the disinvestment in higher education on the part of the state has been stunning, absolutely stunning. We will continue to thrive at the University of Washington, I have no doubt about that, but it will come at a cost in terms of our capacity to provide the kind of access that we want to ensure that our students have in this state. Right now, 30% plus of our entering freshman class every year are first-generation students who don't necessarily have the kinds of resources historically that many others have had to be able to engage in higher education. This, of all the natural resources we've talked about, the one we cannot afford to waste are the young people in the state. And the state's disinvestment over the last 2 decades, really, but particularly precipitous, is something that I think everybody who cares about the future of the state, particularly in the high-tech space, really ought to be panicked about, not just concerned about, but panicked.
Fantastic. You two have been wonderful. Your institutions are stunning, and absolutely leading the way for Washington State. I want to just personally thank you both for taking the time, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.